This is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's world's toughest mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast. On today's show...
But yeah, my name's Matty Gregg. I have done 5 world's toughest mudders up to this point, and I love doing world's toughest, man. There's nothing like it in the world.
But before we talk to Matty Gregg, just some Tough Mudder news. Last week, Tough Mudder announced the first set of rules for the toughest Mudder events starting in March. As we get closer to the race, we'll have a whole episode. We'll talk about the rules and break them down. But to learn more about them, if you go to mudrunguide.com, Wesley Kerr wrote a good article about them, kind of breaking them down. Something that changed since Wesley wrote that article is in order to get a free entry to World's Toughest Mudder, you now need to reach 50 miles in the 8 hours of Toughest Mudder. That was a change from originally it was 40 miles, and then it was not an option. It was taken off the table as a prize, and that was upsetting for a lot of people. So 50 miles for a free World's Toughest Mudder entry. It's still more than 40, but it's available to you. And again, more on Toughest Mudder in the weeks to come. Hey, thanks to everybody who said something kind about the podcast. I appreciate it. Would you do me a favor? Would you go to iTunes, search for World's Toughest Podcast, and then leave us a review? It would help other people find the podcast. So tell your friends about the podcast, and don't forget, new episode every Tuesday. Let's talk to Matty Gregg. Matty Gregg, tell me about your first World's Toughest Mudder.
The first World's Toughest Mudder, 2012, is when I did my first, and it was in New Jersey, and I remember standing on the starting line with a bunch of people that were in wetsuits. Thankfully, 2011 happened. A bunch of people had done it and said, you know what, you probably should bring a wetsuit for this year because it's going to be below freezing, and you do not want to get caught, both literally and metaphorically with your pants down. So, I brought a couple of different types of wetsuits, put one on, and I saw everybody else, and we just started talking about the craziness that was about to ensue. And, Sean gave us a nice starting line talk, and we were on our way. So, yeah, I remember that first starting moment because they were basically trying to gas us out of the starting line with smoke. Well, mostly smoke us out. They had these like little I don't know what you call them. The smoke.
Those orange smoke bombs?
Yeah, the smoke bombs that you light basically and you try to get people going off the starting line. And it was a little bit more motivational to get out of there because by the time that we had cleared, it was a pretty thick smoke. And we're all like, what's going on here? Because we didn't see that they actually had lit smoke bombs in the front. So we were like, all right, let's get out of here.
They had those in 2015 too.
Yeah, they totally did. I think I got used to them after a little bit, but no, those are, just the entire starting line, experience with everybody being there, and you meet people just sitting right next to you, and you kind of hope you see them out in the course. So it's an experience like no other. I kind of miss New Jersey a little bit, and I think that everybody's done New Jersey will probably say the same thing. New Jersey was a great experience, like no other. They always had one obstacle that threw you for a loop. In 2013, 2012, I thought it was the swim across the river, which was freezing. And then you had to climb this rope ladder called Pirate's Booty. And man, by the time you got out of the swim and then the climb, you were absolutely fried. And back then they were 10-mile loops, so there's nothing like a 10-mile loop. You're out there in the middle of the night and you're like, all right, so I've just done 3 miles and I got 7 more to go. And it's unlike anything else, man.
How'd you do that first year?
First year, to be honest with you, I only did 30 miles that first year, and I gotta say, I was more than proud. I was ecstatic over the wall that I was, or over the moon that I was able to do 30 miles. I know that there were people that were still going over the course of the evening, 50, 60 miles in. But man, when I turned in 30 miles for my first World's Toughest Mudder, I was ecstatic because I had only done I'd done probably about 3 Tough Mudders up to that point, and I realized like this was double or sometimes triple of what a normal Tough Mudder was. So in the middle of the night, I had sufficiently fried my arms to the point where I actually couldn't grip anything because they basically what had happened, my forearms pretty much locked up and I couldn't move. I couldn't grip anything and my hands were just frozen. And so that was kind of the point where my best friend, Adam Nagel, said, you know what, I think we need to put the kibosh on this. And so, I packed up at that point, and luckily they were giving out the black headbands back then for not having to do 24 hours.
Right.
So I was pretty excited to get that thing.
Yeah.
It was great.
So you couldn't even like make a fist? Your forearms were so shot?
Oh yeah, they totally shot. And I'll tell you what it was what I just mentioned, which was the swim, which was below freezing. It didn't matter if you had a wetsuit on too much. But the swim was below freezing all the way across the river or the lake. And then you get to the other part of the lake, and then you have to climb this rope ladder. And it was, by the time you got to the top there, you felt your forearm strength completely shot. So I'll always remember that year, because that year was a very eye-opening one for me. But I realized as soon as I finished it, the next day I wanted to do it again, whereas the night before I'm like, I'm never going to do this again. So that's typical of most experiences, I think. Yeah.
How'd you do this year?
This year was an important, I got to admit, it was a pretty tough year for me, I think, as it related to, some of my physical well-being. I actually went through a spinal fusion surgery in May. And I came back from that. Basically what had happened is I did Battle Frog 24 in March, BFX 24. And during that race, probably about the 7th lap in, I started to, it's the same format as World's Toughest Mudder, 5 mile loops, but about 7th one in, I started not being able to move my left arm, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And basically what happened is 2 weeks later, I woke up in significant pain, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I thought I just needed a massage to work out a kink or something. Mm-hmm. But it ended up being that I actually, that my disc had basically slipped into my spine. So in May, they had to, we did a surgery to basically remove the disc and fuse it. I was basically immobile for the next, month and a half. Can't really move, can't do much, but I committed to trying to do some serious training after that. And I didn't want to do anything too crazy. So, as opposed to just sitting there running, which is what I normally do, I actually went to a specialist that dealt with, sports injuries and also physical therapy, in the sense that, at my age, at 38, as you probably can attest to somewhat, that, it's probably better not to just sit there and just lift weights to the point where you can't move the next day. And Sure. It's probably better to try to do some sort of resistance training. And so I started doing resistance training with resistance bands, and it absolutely improved everything for me. I started to eat right. So I lost a lot of weight. And essentially what ended up happening is when I got to Worlds, as an unintended result, I was able to get 65 miles. And for me, 65 miles is a record. It's a personal record. And I couldn't be happier with that result.
How did the fused spine hold up with the cliff?
It's a funny story, actually. So everybody kept saying to me, including my surgeon, he said, "You're not doing the cliff." I told him about all the obstacles that we were going to run into, and he said, the only one I'm deathly afraid of is the cliff. So I kept taking the penalty until one lap. I just said, you know what, I'm going to try it. And I shouldn't have tried it, but it didn't do too badly. I landed a little bit backwards, so I hit my head a tiny bit on the water. But it was not as bad as Kong, surprisingly enough.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. probably the worst because there's just I mean, the fact that you're landing on air pads is fine, but there's just no give when you actually jump right off and land on the pad. You're even if you do it in kind of a sitting motion, your whole back goes back and then your head kind of hits the air pad and it doesn't feel good when you have spinal fusion. Right. So yeah, that was a little rough for a bit, but the cliff for the one time I did it, it was okay. And I was just petrified to ever try it again. So
what did you think of this year's course?
I loved it, man. I loved it. The thing I loved about it the most is that people were actually really flying through it. I think when we saw it at first, everybody was completely intimidated by it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, people saying, "Oh, geez," I keep wanting to call it was called Double Rainbow, right? Double Rainbow, yeah. So that was the one where it was like the Double King of the Swingers. I think when everybody had seen that, they were, completely petrified of it. But when you got up there and actually did it, it was like, wow, this is really fun.
Yeah.
And so it kind of kept me going all through the night to get back to Double Rainbow every single lap. And so I felt like I was going a lot faster in terms of my pace on some of these things. Kong was intimidating, and I did it until basically I lost all my body strength on the top. Mm-hmm. But I noticed that there were a lot of people that were able to get through obstacles much easier this year, and much of that had to do with the elements on top of the fact that that people had trained more for it. As it relates to like the course itself, man, these new obstacles are really, really cool, and I'm excited to do them in a regular Tough Mudder. I'm finding myself kind of renewed as it relates to my interest in Tough Mudder. It doesn't feel like it's the same thing that we've been doing for the past 3-4 years. I feel like there's a lot more focus on the innovation of obstacles, and that's just going to take us into 2020 and beyond. So,
do you want to talk about the new obstacles? Augustus Gloop. What'd you think of that?
Augustus Gloop, man. There's nothing like getting a fire hose on your head while you're trying to go through a tube. If you're claustrophobic, this is the perfect thing for you. It took me about 8 laps to figure out the right way to do that, where, you kind of want to, I think just everybody's natural motion on that is to basically kind of go into the tube and face back through the glass or through the plastic so that you can kind of see through, and then like just use your arms and legs to kind of climb up.
Right.
But it took me about 10 laps, and it actually took somebody else to say, "Hey, Matty, why don't you turn sideways and try it?"
Yes.
I'm like, oh. I'm on mile 50, and I'm like trying to think, and I'm like, wow, this is much easier.
Yep.
So yeah, that was kind of embarrassing. I'm like, yeah, this seemed like more common sense to do it this way. But man, I actually, to be honest with you, I liked it a lot because I felt like it cleaned us off. Mm-hmm. So got pretty dirty. Stage 5 clinger. I'm trying to go in order here, actually, into the event. So there was Stage 5 clinger, which is that going to be the name of it when it reaches Tough Mudder?
You know what? There's 2 of them. It's the reach around is the first time. If it's their first time at a Tough Mudder, it'll be called the reach around, and it's much easier. For the Legionnaires, it's going to be Stage 5 clinger. I think it's going to be pretty much what we saw at World's Toughest. At
World's Toughest, okay. So yeah, the Stage 5 clinger, it was great. I'm kind of glad they made it a little bit easier for us with the rope, just because towards the end, I think upper body strength was tough to come by. Mm-hmm. But to be honest with you, I think if they would have kept it the same way, it would have been okay. It was cool. There's not much to do other than like to demonstrate that you really have amazing upper body, especially when you have to make that rotation after you do the monkey bars across. But it was pretty cool. It felt different than just doing straight monkey bars. And actually, speaking of monkey bars, what was it? It was what was it? Funky Monkey
Revolution.
It's called Funky Monkey Revolution, right?
Yep.
The Revolution. Okay, that was my favorite. I am not that good at Funky Monkey 2.0. I just do not have the skill to transfer over from the normal monkey bars to the swing. For some reason, it's just lost on me.
I can't get from the swing to that last bar. Like, I could get to the swing, but man.
You have the same problem, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know what it is. There's just some block on me or something. But when I don't know if you found Revolution to be easier, but there's definitely a process to doing it. And once you get the process down, then it's actually a lot of fun. Like that last triple swing for the wheels, when the wheels turn, I used to play this video game called Dragon's Lair a long time ago. I'm kind of dating myself, but I used to play it in the arcade where basically the only thing that you could do in Dragon's Lair, because it was like a cartoon, is you could press up, down, left, right, and press the sword button. And basically what it would do, it would actually rewrite, because you couldn't actually move the character anywhere. It would basically just kind of rewrite the story based upon where you went.
Sure.
But I always felt like I was in a video game when I was doing that, because the timing had to be perfect to transfer over to the next wheel.
Right.
So I just pictured myself in like a video game when I was doing it. I know that's a dork comment to make, but I loved it, man. I just had fun all night on that.
Did you get a chance to go through the Arctic Enema Rebirth?
Arctic Enema Rebirth.
It was the penalty for I want to call it. It's not roll the dice. The gamble. It was the penalty for the gamble.
Oh,
couldn't go over the wall.
You know what? I saw that thing the first time around, and I'm like, oh no. Okay. Did you went through that?
I didn't go through it at World's Toughest. I did it at the Tough Mudder in Vegas 2 weeks before.
Okay.
And it's like all the fun of Arctic Enema with the claustrophobia of Augustus Gloop or whatever. It's
really,
yeah. And they're telling you to go. You saw it. It's the pipes, those black pipes they have that goes into the water instead of just sliding down the plywood. But they're telling you to go head first now. Or they were telling us to go head first, and I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, claustrophobia is fun, and Arctic Enema is fun, but I don't know if I'd want to put them together.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound too much fun to me.
That's pretty intense. And the other new one they brought is Kong.
Yeah, so Kong was, I'll tell you what, it was probably the most intimidating for me to get up there and see the rings so spaced apart from each other. And you knew that you had about a good 10 to 15 feet of drop if you didn't hit that ring. Mm-hmm. You almost basically powered through it out of necessity. It wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be, especially at night. Actually, they made a bunch of changes at night. They started off with the rings, and the rings were fine. They were okay until I lost my upper body, and I was like, I don't trust myself because, of course, with my neck fusion, I couldn't land weird, so I always had to basically just guarantee my safety by jumping off. But when I was actually doing the rings, I felt it didn't feel as bad as I thought it would. Seeing it from a distance. But then they started adding poles and stuff, and once the poles got on there with the rope that you could walk across, I was like, oh, this is great. Mm-hmm. So a lot easier, a lot better. But then they removed the rope, and then it just became all poles and rings, and it's intimidating when you first see it, man. But when you start to get through it, as I'm sure you can attest to, it did become fun. Unless you had to jump off.
Oh, getting across. No, once it was just the pole across, I just jumped. But when it was the rings, but man, getting across those, it's not strength. It's more timing. Just like, it doesn't require a lot of grip strength. It's just kind of be patient and calm, and you can get through it.
Yeah, exactly. That's just it. And it took me a millisecond to figure that out, because when I got up there, I'm like, okay, I just need to reach the next one. Mm-hmm. And then what I'll do is I'll use my momentum to reach the next one. But what I realized is the momentum, if I just even let go of the ring before me, the momentum would just carry me right into the next ring. I didn't need to like swing or do anything crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, that was a fun one.
How many Tough Mudder events have you done?
So I have done 45. So World's Toughest Mudder was my 45th. And I plan on doing 5 this year, with World's Toughest Mudder being my 50th. Oh,
that'd be cool.
So, yeah, it's going to be kind of cool that I'll be able to get my headband at the same time, my 50X headband at the same time that I get, hopefully, my black headband. So,
yeah.
Kind of really looking forward to that. I'm hoping everything works out, and I can stay healthy enough, not over a course of training, but more over the course of those 24 hours that I can be healthy enough to just kind of, I see a vision of how it would end, and I'm hoping it would end at daylight with me being able to get my 50X. That'd be nice.
Sure. Have you picked out the other 4 that you're going to do?
Yeah, so we're doing Toughest Mudder is going to be in LA. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be the first one that I do this year. And then I have really, really strong ties in New England there. And actually, so I'll probably do my 47th over in New England. Although I can't really remember which one comes first. I think maybe the one, I'm going to try to do the one in Shanghai this year, actually.
Shanghai.
Yeah, so Shanghai, they're doing their first Tough Mudder in China, so I really wanted to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Because my job actually does a lot of things in Shanghai as well, so I'm hoping to time it where I can go over there and do a Tough Mudder at the same time. It's going to be a lot of fun to do that. And so Shanghai, New England, Tough Mudder New England, and then hopefully my 49th will be at Tri-State. And I think the reason I love it at Tri-State is because it's where the original World's Toughest Mudder was in New Jersey.
Sure.
So that's kind of the 4 that I'm looking at, and then of course World's Toughest Mudder would be a great 50th.
What's the best moment you've ever had at a World's Toughest or at a Tough Mudder?
That's a good question. There's been so many things that have literally changed my life at World's Toughest Mudder. I remember I'll tell you a couple of them because I think that's it's very difficult to give the nod to one. I think my first Tough Mudder I'll always have this like place in my heart for because it basically my best friend Adam, who actually came to World's Toughest Mudder in 2012 and was my what we'll call our unofficial pit crew because there was no pit crew back then at World's Toughest Mudder 12. He became my best friend, and it was that experience that brought us together. That just kind of strengthened our relationship. I mean, we knew each other through work, but we didn't really know much about each other. And I remember the day that he came into my office and said, "Hey, man, there's this really crazy thing going on up in Lake Tahoe. We should go do it." And I'm like, "What is it?" And he's like, "Oh, it's this, they call it Tough Mudder." And we looked it up on the website, and another guy had come in at the same time. He's like, "What are you guys looking at?" And Adam and I go, "Oh, this Tough Mudder thing. It looks kind of neat. I think we're going to do it." And he's like, "All right, count me in." So all 3 of us signed up for this Tough Mudder in Lake Tahoe. And there's just, the thing was 15 miles. It was 3,000 feet of elevation gain. It was absolutely crazy, man. And I'll always remember that experience as one of the fondest weekends of my life, just because it was something new and it was something that made me realize, like, I got to get back into fitness. I really got to focus on this as something in my life. Mm-hmm. So it kind of changed everything for me. So that's one experience. I'll tell you what. There's a funny story. Okay, so we founded the Orphan Tent in 2014, right?
Okay.
So the Orphan Tent was founded in 2014. Basically what it was it was an idea that I said to Melissa. I think it was Melissa. We were talking about this idea that it's like, why don't we just put together like a tent for people or an area for people that don't have like a pit crew coming? Because in 2013, they started to kind of allow pit crew in. Uh-huh. And I realized how helpful it was for somebody to just help us get ready to go out to another lap. So I'm like, oh, geez, okay, so let's try to get an Orphan Tent going. I didn't like the name Orphan Tent, but Melissa liked it, and Tracy loved it, so Pit Mama loved it, so we were gonna go with it. Anyway, the Orphan Tent was built, and in 2014 was the year of the big sandstorm. Mm-hmm. So we had this big changing tent that was part of the Orphan Tent. It was a VW Orange Bug. And that VW Bug was it was a wonderfully large tent, and it was funny to look at, but it wasn't very aerodynamic. So what ended up happening was Ken Jacobus, the godfather of the World's Toughest Mudder community, is actually helping people at the tent after he kind of stopped running. He was picking out rocks in people's shoes, and he was like, trying to just help people with whatever they needed. And I remember coming in for a pit stop, and I felt the wind picking up, and I was like, oh, geez, it's starting to get a little bit heavy. And I put on all my stuff, and he helped me put all my stuff on. And so I went out for another lap, ready to go for another lap, and then I saw that the wind had really, really picked up. I mean, we're talking like 50 miles an hour at least. And I'm like, oh, geez. And this had to be around like 10 or 11 p.m. at night. So I go back in, and I'm like trying to look around, seeing if everything is okay. And I see Ken one-arming the VW bus from flying off into the distance. Just imagine this big dude's like just one-arming this thing, holding onto a pole from this big VW bus going off, like flying off into the abyss. And I look at him, I'm like, and I'm basically shouting because the wind is so loud. I'm like, Ken, are you okay? And he looks back at me and he goes, go! And I just couldn't. I laughed about that the entire rest of the night. It felt like it was like something out of a movie. It was just crazy.
That's funny.
So yeah, that was a fun. It was a fun experience. Yeah, I think those are the big ones. Like just I've always had great experiences with people out on the course too. Mm-hmm. So those have been great. I did a lap with Amelia. That was the first time I actually met her in 2014, and it was a fun experience, and that's something that I'll never forget. I met some of my very, very good friends who have helped me through a lot of stuff. Cassie Harris has been is a great person. Carlo Piscatello, we've done a lot of stuff together. Eric Panu is somebody that I deeply respect. Jim Campbell, and of course Ken and Keith Allen, Keith Allen is probably one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. In real life, there are some things that I probably shouldn't mention on the podcast, but him and I just do some crazy stuff on the course. So he's a lot of fun too.
What's the lowest point you've ever been at a Tough Mudder?
That's a good question. I think 2015. I did a year with Four Eyes. That was a really, really fun experience. I love those guys. They're incredible people, very, very smart, very intelligent, and you know what? They just care about people. They'll be out in the course and they'll just be like, they'll see somebody struggling and then we'll just stop what we're doing. We're not going to advance until we help those folks out. And, that's what I feel like, my tribe is. Mm-hmm. And, just to do the experience with them was great. And I know you're asking about a low point. And so you're probably like, well, why is he bringing this up? Well, it was very, very cold that year. Yeah. You did 2015, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you'll remember, there were a lot of people dropping out due to hypothermia. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is because the water that we had to get in and out of was just absolutely freezing. And, we were a little bit behind the curve. Many of us were behind the curve as it related to putting on our wetsuits because it was kind of deceiving. Mm-hmm. Like the way that the temperature dropped at night was very quick. The water then became extremely cold and people were just kind of caught, unaware. And I remember feeling like, and I had walking pneumonia going into it. And I just felt like, at certain points of the evening that I was dragging like I was doing a cinder block carry around the entire 5 miles. And I couldn't figure out why, but then it kind of all pieced together to me that it was just that the cold had slowed me down and slowed us all down. And I just felt like, to some degree that I was letting my teammates down, but they never made me feel like that. So I think that was probably the lowest point. It was just feeling, guilty about the fact that I might've been holding them up when, but it had, that's just part of being on a team. It's like, you carry your own weight and you just hope for the best. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about going back to Vegas for another year?
I'm excited. I think I'm one of the very few people. Well, I don't know if I'm one of the very few people, but I am over the moon about it because I'm actually putting on Rocky Horror Show at the same time in Las Vegas. Our production company is going to be in Las Vegas that weekend, putting on Rocky Horror Show a little bit farther uptown. And so I love the fact that there's this convergence where I can do two things at once. So for me, it's wonderful. The fact that here's the thing, it's going to be very difficult to go to another venue and have things like the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like the cliff has kind of become iconic in the way that we, think of World's Toughest Mudder, because it's always that thing that people on the outside look at and say, wow, I don't think I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
The electricity, I think people have kind of warmed up to, but like this idea that, that we're doing the cliff, it's just, it's an institution unto itself. So I'm kind of looking forward to having my last year where I've healed my neck sufficiently to the point where I can actually do the cliff again.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just something to being back in Las Vegas that makes it a destination week. I don't have to necessarily just make it, in New Jersey, it was wonderful. The course was wonderful. The idea that it was like freezing was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that you can go on the strip, like on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and kind of enjoy being there with your friends. And, I know they do pub crawls and all that other stuff. There's nothing like that, man. The idea that we can spend a week there and have a lot of fun is, that's what kind of makes the experience. It's not just about the 24 hours.
Yeah, eventually they'll probably go somewhere else, but they're going to have to replace the cliff with something. Maybe not a big jump, but something, impressive.
Yeah, hopefully it's not Leap of Faith from 2013. I hope to never see that obstacle ever again.
I wasn't at 2013. Leap of Faith.
Oh, okay. Oh, Leap of Faith. Yeah. So it was Leap of Faith was basically it was like walk the plank.
Okay. Except
they physically put planks out at the end of the walk the plank, and you had to jump out about 8 feet onto a cargo net. Now the cargo net had padding on the top of it, but every single time you hit that cargo net, it felt like you were running into a brick wall. Huh. And it was the most unpleasant experience of all time. Like I remember, like, I've been in car accidents. And I still remember the impact of Leap of Faith more than I remember the impact of the car. And it's not because I got knocked out in the car. I just remember that impact as something that was like my calves would cramp up, or I'd hit my head, or it was just, it was an awful. I hope Brady never gets that idea ever again. I hope he forgot about it.
Yeah, we probably better not talk about it too much.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's Leap of, or it's something else. I don't know. We got to come up with a code name for it.
What's your favorite obstacle
of all time?
Yeah, all time.
There's a two-part answer to that, and I think that the reason there's a two-part answer is because which one is something that I can do by myself, or that's intended to do by myself, versus which one would I do with a team?
Both.
The one that I would. What's that?
Both of them.
Yeah, so the one that I would do with a team would be like I can never remember its new name. I'll always call it Roll the Dice.
Loch Ness Monster, they call it now. Yeah.
Thank you, Loch Ness Monster. Yeah, that one I just absolutely love. If the water's not too cold, I will sit in there for hours and just flip that thing until we get as many people possible over that thing. I just love it. I don't know why. It's maybe it's a reverse hamster. Instinct that we have.
It's a blast. It's a blast.
Hours and just wait. What's that?
It's a blast. You're right.
Yeah, exactly. So I love it. And the other one though that has actually become my new favorite is Double Rainbow. I wish they would make it into Quadruple Rainbow or something like that, where you have to traverse the thing like 4 times in order to get to the air pocket. But I love that thing, man. It's making me single-handedly look forward to Tough Mudder or Toughest Mudder or whatever we're doing in 2017. So man, that thing is just a lot of fun. King of the Swingers for me wasn't as fun as Double Rainbow, and I think it was because you always were like trying to reach that bell, and whether you did or whether you didn't, it seemed like there was that added incentive to do that. But I love the idea of just making it across Double Rainbow by switching your weight, or like unhinging your hands and grabbing the other one really, really quickly. Like it's so much fun.
Have you seen the changes they're making to it for the Toughest Mudder?
I haven't. What are they doing?
Instead of a second bar for you to grab onto, there is it looks like a cargo net that you jump out, grab the first bar, and swing, and then it's hard to tell from the video. You either jump from the bar and catch yourself on the cargo net, and then the cargo net slides down at like a 45-degree angle and takes you to the ground, and you leave dry. Or it might I can't tell from the video, but you jump to the bar, swing, and then just like on the double rainbow, how you can kind of grab both bars at the same time.
Yeah.
You can reach out, grab the cargo net, and then take your second hand to the cargo net and slide, and then the cargo net slides down.
Okay.
So
gotcha.
they put a video out a week or two ago showing the toughest obstacles. And that was one of them.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, and I think I did see that, but it wasn't exactly. I don't think I spent a lot of time like specifically looking at it. But I guess my whole thing is just as long as you don't have to jump into the cargo net, I'm totally cool with it.
Yeah, that jumping into cargo nets is not easy.
Well, and the idea that they're trying to bring back leap of faith in some way, I'm that impact. So, and it's funny because leap of faith. Just going back to that story in 2013, Deanna Blake passed me late at night at 2 a.m. and she did exactly what I did, which is I'm not jumping across to that cargo net. Screw that. She just jumped right in the water and then took the half-mile penalty.
Oh, wow.
It was a half mile. And, I didn't even bat an eyelash. I was just like, I am not feeling that impact anymore. I did it for, 6 laps and said, forget it.
So you've done 45 events. What's your favorite Tough Mudder course?
Out of the 45?
Yeah, like do you like Whistler or Tahoe, or where do you like to go?
There are two actual like distinct ones that I really enjoy. I think the one that I did in Tahoe, the original 2011 Squaw Valley Tahoe, I like that one because, first of all, they advertised it as 12 miles. It ended up being like 16 and a half. And it was absolutely crazy, some of the stuff that you had to do. Like they were having you basically walk the plank into a lake. You had to swim over like about 100 yards under barrels that had barbed wire on them. And then finally you would basically get out of that really, really cold water, by the way, because it's sitting on top of a mountain at 9,000 feet. So, that there's just some legendary things in my mind that I remember about that I'll never forget, especially because it also like formed those bonds between some of my best friends and I. Mm-hmm. So that was really my favorite, regular Tough Mudder. But there is another kind of distinct experience that I remember, and it was I'm trying to remember the year, but 2013. I actually reconnected with a bunch of like elementary school friends mm-hmm. in New Hampshire. And the way that I did it was I basically just invited them all to go do Tough Mudder. And so like I hadn't seen these people in 20 years, at least 20, 25 years. And they saw that I was doing these Tough Mudders, and they started to basically start exercising, get in shape. And we all then saw each other. We kind of converged on the course. And man, there's nothing like seeing friends after 20 years and catching up while you're actually running a Tough Mudder.
Yeah.
Man, I recommend that to anybody that hasn't seen a friend in a long time, where you basically just call them up and say, hey man, I know we haven't talked in a long time. Do you want to just, you want to do something crazy together?
Uh-huh.
And, they'll probably be like, no, that's nuts. Especially if they have kids, but you might get lucky and you might be able to do something that, brings you back together. So.
What's your plan or what's your strategy for the toughest in LA?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a strategy for toughest Mudder, I think it's mostly in the training and the eating. The thing that I found out this year that actually helped me get to 65 miles is the part that always took me out of a race is my stomach. And I think that my problem with my eating in the past has been that I've pretty much focused on a ratio that's ridiculous in terms of protein to carbs. I mean, I've eaten like, 1 gram of protein every 10 grams of carbs that I actually would, push through my system. And I realize now that there has to be more of a balance.
Is that during training or during the race?
During training, actually, because when you get to the race, it's too late. It took me a long time to figure that out. But like when you get to the race, it doesn't really matter what you put in your body at that point. I think it matters from a sense of like maybe it'll keep you going. But what it won't do is it won't actually regulate your body to be able to digest protein in the correct way. And so you basically become reliant on carbs. And for me, my carbs, carbs like, gels and goos and, anything that you basically, anything that gives you a boost. I found that after lap 8, I started to just feel bad sick to my stomach, and I couldn't keep anything down.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when that happens, what ends up happening is that you start to go in a downhill spiral. There's no way to get out of that once you get behind your nutrition. So what I found is that eating right up to the race is probably one of the best strategies you can have, where I try to keep a 1.5 grams of protein to 1 gram of carbs ratio. So that when I get to the race, my stomach just feels much better. And that might just be me, but I do find that increasing the ratio somehow, and I've asked a couple of other racers in terms of what they think, and it seems like it works pretty well for people.
Do you use protein supplements or drinks, or do you just eat a lot of eggs and chicken?
Both. A lot depends upon, what, unfortunately a lot depends on my job. So it's do I have time to actually make eggs, or do I have time to go get eggs? Or do I just have time for a protein shake? Mm-hmm. It's more about just trying to keep that ratio as much as I can. For lunch and dinner, I have, mostly lunch, because sometimes I skip dinner just due to acid reflux issues I've had. But for lunch, I actually have a pretty big lunch, and I just try to focus on having chicken or steak or some sort of meat, mm-hmm. Or I'll just blow through the burrito bar at Apple. So those are my go-tos.
Did you see the TV shows, the pre-show, the Christmas shows?
I did.
What did you think of that?
I was worried I wouldn't see. I was worried I wouldn't see because I was on a plane, but I was. Well, the first show was easy. The Road to World's Toughest Mudder was easy to see because it was beforehand. Hey, well, you know what? They focused on Four Eyes, so I'm a big fan. Clearly, I liked him. I liked him a lot. I think the World's Toughest Mudder community had a legitimate gripe in the sense that they said that the World's Toughest Mudder that was aired on CBS didn't focus enough on the community and focus too much on the elite runners. But I guess my counterpoint would be that if you take the series as a whole, I think it basically was able to establish what it needed to, which was there are stars in the in racing, and then there are also regular people that do World's Toughest Mudder as well. Mm-hmm. I do think that Tough Mudder suffers a bit now from a brand duality, and what I mean by that is that I know this is not the original question you asked, but
no, go ahead.
It does. Well, yeah. So it actually does have a little bit to do with my perception of World's Toughest Mudder as a whole, which is, they're kind of appealing now to the elite racers, whereas, the first 2 to 3 years, 3 to 4 years, they didn't necessarily do that. They were more focused on, if you're a Tough Mudder competitor, and yes, you have to qualify, but if you're a Tough Mudder competitor, then you can join us at World's Toughest Mudder. And yeah, so it's been kind of a weird, part of the Tough Mudder brand, whereas we have Tough Mudder that focuses on this idea of camaraderie, of team, of helping your fellow man across the finish line, fellow woman. And then they have this World's Toughest Mudder, which is basically okay, we're focusing on the elite racers. But I think what they did really, really well was combine the two ideas, which is in the case of the guy that came in second place, I can't remember his name.
Austin is there.
Yeah, Austin is there. He was helped across the finish line by two folks, or one of his laps, and actually the next lap as well, where they went with him and tried to help him across. And I think it was really, really cool that you could see that kind of duality at work. There was the camaraderie that was that defined what Tough Mudder is all about. Will Dean said that he went about this to try to create leaders in the world. And I think this kind of showed this idea where there's this compassion to everything that we do while we're racing. And I don't think you'll see that in other race series. You won't see that compassion or that camaraderie where people will help even, the greatest of racers past the finish line, because mostly people are focused on their end goal in those other races. Mm-hmm. So there's this duality there. And I think that there could be a little bit more focus on the camaraderie, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think they captured both sides of that perfectly when I think it was when Trevor passed Austin, and they kind of did a fist bump.
They did a fist bump, right?
That was, I mean, you would never see that in another race series or even another sport. I can't imagine seeing that in any other high level competitive event.
You're right on. Like that fist bump, I think for me was like, whoa. And it wasn't a whoa moment in the sense that I was surprised that it happened. It was more of a whoa moment in the sense that I'm looking at it on TV.
Yeah.
I'm watching it like it's a competitive thing, and then you see it, and then you're like, that's right. That is what separates us from the rest of the race series that are out there.
What do you think about the Tougher Mudder? Have you heard about that?
I have a Tougher Mudder community online, man.
I'm a member. It's pretty hilarious.
I started the Tougher Mudder community along with Keith Allen and Ken, and I have no idea who else is an admin at this point. I think we've got somebody's being added every
I think
other
the pinned
day.
post right now is, I thought this was the Tofu Mudder community.
The Tofu Mudder. That's, I think it's funny because I actually suggested a long time ago that they have a series called Tougher Mudder. My idea actually was the length of it, to make it longer than Tough Mudder. So it was basically like where you this concept of us doing multi-laps now, where you basically have a new series where you'd call it Tougher Mudder, and then multi-laps would actually take place. It didn't have anything to do with timing chips. And I think timing chips are great. Again, it speaks to that duality of brand now. It's like, okay, we have the elites that care about their time frame in terms of how long it takes for them to get across the finish line. But then we also have, the general public who just wants to challenge themselves. And in order to have both of that, which we do now, we have, tough, tougher, toughest, and world's toughest. You need to have you need to have that bridge. You need to have that person that's trying that 10-mile loop, and to see how competitive they can be with each other and with themselves.
Yeah, I think it'll end up being a good thing. It seems like from the 5-mile half mudder to the 10-mile, it's a big leap up to the 8 hours of the toughest. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I told my friend about the. My friend actually wanted to do so he's a competitive person, and he was like, okay, so the only one I can do that's timed is the 8-hour one, yeah? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, okay, well, I'll do that one then. And then the Tougher Mudder came out, and he's like, oh, cool, I'll do that one. That's great. So definitely a niche for it. There's no question about it. I think that they'll do very, very well this year with their new product lineup.
I've got a friend just like that. He did his first Tough Mudder last year, but he's like, yeah, it wasn't, no one was, there was no time, like he was kind of bummed, like he couldn't see how he ranked against everybody else.
Yeah.
So he was thinking about going like another direction for his next race. And so I think Tougher Mudder is going to keep him in the fold.
Very cool. And he doesn't have a problem. Did you talk to him at all about the $30 and?
No, he doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, Tough Mudder's kind of at the top on the pay scale already, so I don't think $30 is going to knock anyone out.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah.
Hey, tell me about St. Baldricks.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, so there's actually 2 parts of that. So St. Baldricks was what we supported as a community last year. I think there were 50 people involved in it overall, which had to do with shavies and shavers, and just about everybody that was involved. I got involved. From St. Baldrick's, from Cassie Harris, who has been a big believer in St. Baldrick's mission for many years. St. Baldrick's got its name from a couple of people in Manhattan one day went to a bar from Wall Street, and they're just like, you know what? And this was back in the dot-com era, and they were having a great run, and they just basically said to each other, they're like, you know what? We should get back to the community. And then one of the guys said to the other, they said, okay, well, if you shave your head, I'll give, $200 to this charity. And the guy's like, all right, cool. But then they started to think, well, maybe we can make an event out of this. And so they did. They made an event that took place on St. Patrick's Day. So basically the St. Baldrick's name came from the idea that people are getting bald, and it started on St. Patrick's Day.
St. Baldricks. I did not know that.
Yeah. It's kind of one of these little unknown, like I had to figure out where the name came from, but that's where it came from, which is kind of funny. So we set a World's Toughest Mudder record this year by raising $125,000, and definitely couldn't have been done without the contributions from every member of the community that was involved. The cool thing about what they did this year, what everybody did this year, is they not only just raised money from people they knew, but they also had their own kind of separate events on the side. Like many people, like Mark, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Mark Raby was one of our amazing fundraisers, and he would have these like little things that he'd set up at his gym, like these little displays, and basically would just ask people for money. And they would donate and contribute, and which was great. And there were so many other examples of just events that took place throughout the year that contributed to the $125,000 that we raised. So I was over the moon about the community, and that's a perfect example of like how the community can come together. There was no intrinsic benefit to anybody doing it, but. And we didn't know anything at the time when we started this about CBS Sports. We didn't know anything about like whether Tough Mudder would even concern themselves with it, especially because it wasn't the charity that they supported. But these people just came together and said, you know what, this is an important cause, and we have the opportunity at World's Toughest Mudder to convince a lot of people that we're crazy, so they'll donate to us.
Well, there were a lot of people that were. Not selling, but they were like, if you donated money, you'd get a patch or a pit crew headband or a pair of socks. People kind of doing their own little mini fundraisers inside the big fundraiser. Yeah,
it literally was a fundraising ecosystem on its own. We during the Thursday night and Saturday night dinners, or Thursday night, Friday night dinners. There was no Saturday night dinner because you were eating on the course. Thursday night and Friday night dinners, we had raffles. We had, people would get together, 400, 500 members of the community, and we'd have raffles. We'd have, the Thursday night was a sock dinner where people could pick up their socks after they donated to St. Baldricks, and we plan on doing that this year. It was just great. And that's just an example of what happens when a community comes together for a cause. And, $125,000, St. Baldricks even. They were just shocked with the amount of time and effort that we put into it. So,
special thanks to Matty Gregg for appearing in this episode. Thanks a lot, Matty. Feel free to shoot me an email at willhicks@gmail.com or leave a review on iTunes or say something on the community page. Let us know what you think of the podcast. New episode next Tuesday. Thanks a lot, you guys.